Sunfield Meadows was the kind of suburban neighborhood featured in glossy real estate magazines. Broad streets lined with evenly spaced trees, immaculate lawns trimmed to the perfect height, and houses painted in harmonious neutral tones. Children's bicycles rested on driveways, and neighbors exchanged friendly waves over hedges. A majestic sign at the entrance welcomed visitors to Sunfield Meadows, a community of neighbors. Behind these manicured facades, however, lay a powerful influence: the Homeowners Association, HOA. Most of the Sunfield Meadows HOA board members were practical and well-meaning, handling routine duties like enforcing quiet hours and approving fence heights. Yet one particular board member stood out: Wanda Brinkley, a middle-aged woman with a perpetually pinched expression, who every neighbor privately called Karen. At first glance, Wanda, Karen, appeared ordinary: average height, shoulder-length graying hair, always dressed in neat pastel sweaters and pressed slacks. But behind the unremarkable exterior was a drive for control that extended into every corner of the neighborhood. She was known for her scathing letters of violation whenever trash cans were left out an hour too long or a flower bed contained a non-compliant color of petunia. Neighbors learned to dread her morning inspection walks when she roamed the sidewalks, phone in hand, ready to snap photos of the slightest perceived infraction. For a time, Karen's vigilant ways seemed limited to yard issues and noise complaints. But even she couldn't resist the sight of a bustling Girl Scout cookie stand. When children set up a table with hand-drawn signs, she found them unsightly. She believed they disrupted the pristine image of Sunfield Meadows, turning an idyllic sidewalk into a commercial thoroughfare. Little did anyone know just how far she would go to remove what she deemed an inconvenience. Every spring, Girl Scout Troop 846 prepared eagerly for cookie season. The troop comprised about a dozen girls, ranging from 8 to 12 years old, each excited to sell Thin Mints, Samoas, Tagalongs, and other beloved treats. For them, cookie sales were more than a fundraiser. They were a cherished tradition, teaching teamwork, money management, and communication skills. Troop 840 SIXS co-leaders, Tracy Randall and Rose Martinez, were mothers who had volunteered countless hours to help the girls learn leadership and community service. Both women lived in Sunfield Meadows themselves and had always found the area pleasant, apart from the occasional meddling of certain HOA figures. This year, Tracy and Rose planned a series of pop-up cookie stands throughout the neighborhood. They secured official permission from the local city office to sell in public spaces, including a small park next to the Sunfield Meadows sign. But a last-minute scheduling conflict forced them to pivot. The park was unexpectedly under renovation, so they needed a new location fast. A prime spot emerged by chance in front of Tracy's home, just a few doors away from the neighborhood clubhouse. It was visible to passing cars, but not so busy as to cause traffic jams. Tracy had a wide, safe driveway where parents could park and walk up to buy cookies. Thus, Troop 846 set its plan. One bright Saturday morning, they'd set up their table along the sidewalk edge of Tracy's property, hang colorful posters, and greet neighbors with smiles. And of course, cookies. On a crisp, sunny morning, the girls arrived with their cookie boxes and supplies. They decorated a folding table with bright tablecloths, taped homemade signs reading, "Girl Scout Cookies. Support Troop 846," and stacked their delicious wares in neat piles. The moment they were set, neighbors began trickling over. Some purchased a box on their way to the grocery store. Others stopped to chat with the excited girls. Within just the first couple hours, sales soared. Everyone loved supporting the neighborhood scouts. However, not everyone was pleased by the troop's presence that morning. From across the street, Karen's curtained windows concealed her watchful eyes. She glared as a small crowd of parents and kids gathered on the sidewalk, occasionally drifting near her carefully manicured lawn. She considered them a nuisance. A single scuff on her precious grass would be enough to ignite her anger. As midday approached, a small line formed at the Girl Scout table. The girls smiled broadly, reciting cookie names and prices as they practiced their sales pitches. Tracy and Rose stood by, making sure the kids handled money properly and stayed safe. Suddenly, the gentle hum of friendly conversations gave way to a sharper, more hostile sound. Karen's distinct voice, laced with disapproval, cutting through the air. "What on earth is going on here?" Karen approached in a brisk stride, arms folded. She pointed at the cookie table as though it were an illegal dumping ground. Her posture radiated confrontation. Tracy, ever polite, greeted her. "Good afternoon, Wanda. We're just running a Girl Scout cookie stand. The girls have their permit, and it's all on my property line. Is there a problem?" Karen's eyes flicked from the table to the squealing children. "You're causing foot traffic," she snapped. "Crowds like this bring down property values and disrupt the peace. The HOA guidelines clearly state no unauthorized commercial activity on residential lots." Rose raised an eyebrow. "We're not a business. This is a Girl Scout troop, and they're only here for a few hours." Karen sniffed. "Commercial is commercial. Even if it's children selling cookies, it's not allowed." Before Rose could object, a neighbor named Mr. O'Malley, a longtime supporter of the Scouts, chimed in. "Karen, it's Saturday, and no one's complaining. The kids are just trying to do some good. We're all neighbors here." But Karen was unmoved. "Well, I'm complaining," she said icily. "I'll be lodging a formal complaint with the HOA about this. Don't say I didn't warn you." With that, she stalked off, leaving a trail of uneasy silence. The girls, though startled, quickly resumed their cheerful sales once Tracy and Rose reassured them they weren't doing anything wrong. The adult volunteers shook their heads, knowing Karen's bark was usually worse than her bite. If a complaint did come, they'd defend the troop. After all, the city's permit overrode petty HOA objections, right? By Monday morning, half of Sunfield Meadows had heard about Karen's run-in with the Girl Scouts. Neighbors rolled their eyes, recalling her reputation for outlandish complaints. Some said, "It's only for a few weekends a year. Why can't she just let the girls be?" Others dreaded the possibility that Karen might succeed in shutting the Scouts down. Within days, Tracy received an official-looking letter. The envelope bore the HOA's insignia, but the signature read, "Wanda Brinkley, Compliance Chair." Inside was a curt message. "Notice of violation. This letter serves as official notice that commercial activity, the sale of cookies, occurred on your property without prior HOA consent. Such activity violates Section 4.3 of the Sunfield Meadows Covenant. Further unauthorized events may result in fines or legal action. Sincerely, Wanda Brinkley, Karen, Compliance Chair, Sunfield Meadows HOA." Tracy sighed. She knew from the HOA's bylaws that the restriction on commercial activity, typically aimed at preventing home-based businesses with visible signage or constant customer foot traffic. Occasional yard sales or kid-run lemonade stands had never been policed so harshly. This letter felt like Karen's personal vendetta, not standard HOA enforcement. Rose, upon hearing the news, shook her head. "She's going too far. We have a permit from the city. The state laws and city ordinances allow charitable stands. I doubt she can do much." Tracy nodded. "I'll talk to the HOA president, see what he thinks." Karen isn't the only board member, so she reached out to Howard Davis, the HOA president, who often tried to keep peace. Over the phone, Howard sighed apologetically. "I'm sorry, Tracy. Wanda's interpretation is extreme. The board hasn't voted on this. She's acting on her own. Let me schedule an emergency discussion to clarify. In the meantime, you have every right to continue your sale if you have city approval." Encouraged, Tracy relayed this to the troop. They decided to set up again next Saturday, hoping to meet or exceed their sales goal. Little did they know that Karen was already planning a far more drastic response. The next Saturday dawned bright and full of promise. The girls arrived at Tracy's property around 9 a.m., wearing their green Girl Scout vests proudly. They had new hand-lettered posters, "Stop by for cookies. Thank you for supporting Troop 846, and a fresh stock of Thin Mints, Samoas, and more." Rose set up a small canopy tent to shield them from the sun, while Tracy arranged a cooler full of water bottles for thirsty customers. Throughout the morning, foot traffic was steady. Parents, seniors out for walks, and even joggers paused to buy a box or two. Encouraging honks from passing cars kept the mood lively. The troop members took turns managing the money box, learning to give correct change. Close to lunchtime, the troop was happily tallying their sales when a jarring scream rang out. "Get off my lawn." It was Karen again, emerging from her house across the street. This time, she carried a bright orange bucket, sloshing ominously. Before anyone grasped her intent, Karen marched to the sidewalk near Tracy's driveway. The startled Girl Scouts, uncertain, backed away from the table. Parents rushed forward, calling, "Karen, What are you doing?" But she ignored them. With a furious grimace, she hurled the bucket's contents, foul, grayish liquid, directly toward the area where the scouts were gathered. A collective gasp rose. The brunt of the water missed the girls by inches but splashed across the pavement, soaking the edge of their tablecloth and spattering onto a few boxes of cookies. Several children shrieked, jumping back. Dirty mop water, judging by the pungent smell, ran in rivulets across the sidewalk. A ruined cluster of cookie boxes toppled from the table, drenched and unsellable. The girls stared in shock, some near tears. Tracy and Rose rushed to comfort them, while a couple of bystanders confronted Karen. "What's wrong with you?" cried Michelle, a troop mom, rage flooding her voice. "They're just kids." Karen set the empty bucket down, crossing her arms. "I warned you people," she snapped, her eyes darting to the soggy boxes. No one listened. "If you won't follow HOA rules, maybe you'll think twice now." Tracy, trembling with anger, knelt beside one girl who clutched a soaked cookie box. "We're calling the police," Tracy said quietly, glaring at Karen. "You just attacked children with dirty water." Karen laughed derisively. "Oh, please. A little water never hurt anyone. Try calling the police. See if they care about a Girl Scout cookie fiasco." Then she turned on her heel and strode back to her house, leaving stunned scouts and furious parents behind. In the hush that followed, one of the younger girls, tears brimming, whispered, "Why would she do that?" The other children tried to console her, while the adults struggled to decide how to respond. They never imagined a neighbor, a grown woman, would stoop so low as to douse Girl Scouts with filthy mop water. News of Karen's outburst spread through Sunfield Meadows in a flash. Neighbors were aghast. While Karen had a history of petty complaints, few believed she would openly assault a group of children, especially in full view of multiple witnesses. Parents of Troop 846 held an emergency meeting at Tracy's house the next day. The living room buzzed with angry chatter. Some demanded they file criminal charges for assault. Others suggested they bring a civil suit for damages. But no one wanted the girls further traumatized by a long legal battle. Rose's husband, who was an attorney, calmly explained, "Throwing dirty water on them is technically battery, but we have to consider how far we want to escalate. The police might not press heavy charges unless they see real harm. She could claim it was an accident or that she was just cleaning. It would be messy in court." Tracy looked at the circle of anxious parents. "We can't let her intimidate the girls. They worked so hard for this cookie sale. If we back down, Karen will feel justified in bullying them." A mother named Linda proposed a bold idea. "What if we don't rely on that spot alone? We could move around the neighborhood, maybe set up near the main entrance or the local shopping center. Then she can't ambush us." Several parents hesitated. "Yes, but that main entrance might be too close to traffic," one said. Others worried that Karen would simply follow them and complain wherever they went. A father, Jonas, spoke up. "I have another thought. We do a drive-through cookie stand, right by the curb near Karen's house. We get local permission to set it up on the public street, not on her property. Cars can line up, the girls can pass boxes through the windows. If we can stand the stairs, that is." The room went quiet. A hush of excitement swept the group as they imagined staging a drive-through cookie operation near Karen's curb, turning her intimidation into free publicity. One mom grinned. "That might be perfect. Everyone will see the troops' presence, and Karen can't dump water on cars without serious consequences." Tracy and Rose exchanged a hopeful look. "It's gutsy," Tracy admitted. "We'd have to check local laws, but the public street is usually regulated by the city, not the HOA. If the city approves, the HOA can't do much." Rose, fired up, declared, "Let's do it. We'll confirm with the city and set a date. This time, we'll put up bigger signs. We'll show Karen that we won't be bullied out of finishing our cookie drive." The parents agreed, eager to channel their anger into a positive, creative solution. They decided to keep the plan under wraps until everything was finalized, knowing that if Karen found out early, she might escalate her sabotage. True to their word, Tracy and Rose contacted the city's community affairs office. They discovered that a short-term roadside fundraiser was allowed under certain conditions. The location had to be safe, not block traffic, and be supervised by adults. Since the street in front of Karen's home had curb parking on one side and moderate speed limits, it seemed feasible. Next, they approached the local police station to notify them of the plan. An officer named Lieutenant Martin confirmed that as long as the parents maintained order, avoided obstructing driveways, and placed signage to direct cars, there should be no problems. "We'll swing by to ensure safety," Lieutenant Martin offered. "If anyone tries to harass you, let us know." Emboldened by this support, Tracy and Rose worked with other parents to design a Girl Scout cookie drive-thru concept. Set the location, a stretch of curb just past Karen's driveway, on the public street. Safety first. Place orange cones to create a clear lane for cars stopping briefly. Signs and posters. Big, colorful posters reading Cookie Drive-Thru. Pull up here. Decorations. Girl Scout flags, balloons, and banners, ensuring a fun, welcoming look. Process. Customers would drive up, roll down their window, place an order, pay, and receive cookies, without ever leaving their cars. Parents joked that if Karen found a new bucket of dirty water, she'd have to throw it on passing vehicles, an act far more likely to land her in legal hot water. Meanwhile, the troop members were cautiously excited. Some still felt rattled by Karen's hostility, but the idea of a drive-thru gave them new enthusiasm. A few neighbors even volunteered to help direct traffic. Mr. O'Malley, a retired crossing guard, offered to wear his old reflective vest and guide vehicles safely. A local band teacher said he'd bring a small speaker and play cheerful music to attract attention. The entire plan snowballed into a mini neighborhood event. The date was set for the following Saturday. The parents resolved to spread the word widely: social media, texts to friends, and even flyers on mailboxes. "Come support Troop 840 SIXS Cookie Drive-Thru," they announced. "We'll be on Maple Street from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. When Saturday arrived, excitement buzzed among the troop. By 8:30 a.m., parents and scouts gathered near Karen's curb, unloading tables, folding chairs, and boxes upon boxes of cookies. They wore bright Girl Scout t-shirts, and some had pinned cookie-shaped badges on their jackets. To reduce direct confrontation, they kept clear of Karen's property line. The entire setup extended from the sidewalk outward, with a row of traffic cones a few feet off the curb. Signs reading "Cookie Drive-Thru, Stop Here" were planted in the ground. A big banner hung from the side of a parked SUV. Balloons bobbed in the breeze, creating a festive atmosphere. Tracy, sporting a green baseball cap, quickly organized the scouts into stations. Order takers, 2 older scouts with clipboards to write down how many boxes each customer wanted. Cashiers, another scout or parent to handle money and give change. Runners, 2 scouts to fetch cookie boxes from the table and hand them to the drivers. One by one, neighbors and friends began rolling up, curious to see the spectacle. A father in a minivan lowered his window, praising the setup. "This is brilliant," he said, buying 5 boxes. Meanwhile, the girls squealed with delight every time a purchase was made, awarding each customer a hearty "thank you." At first, Karen's house appeared still. Her curtains were closed, no sign of movement. But as soon as the drive-thru began drawing more traffic, her door creaked open. Karen stepped out onto her porch, arms folded. She glared at the line of vehicles, disapproval written on her face. Some parents tensed, remembering the mop water incident. They half expected her to dash inside and return with another bucket. But Karen simply stood, eyes scanning for any opportunity to pounce. She might have recognized the risk of a direct attack on cars. Instead, she marched to the edge of her property, took out her phone, and began filming. Troop 846 paid her little mind, publicly, at least. Instead, they greeted each new arrival with bright smiles and chants of cookies for sale. Within an hour, the line of cars stretched halfway down the block. Word had indeed spread. Friends, co-workers, even a local news blogger decided to check it out. Catching sight of Karen, a few visitors honked and waved ironically. She responded with a scowl, ducking back behind the safety of her porch. Clearly, she wasn't used to being so publicly mocked. But for now, she stayed quiet, likely searching for a new angle to disrupt the event. Midway through the drive-thru sale, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up, emblazoned with the Sunfield Meadows HOA logo on its door. Out stepped Howard Davis, the HOA president, accompanied by a newly hired compliance officer, Derek Young. They surveyed the scene. The Girl Scouts diligently selling cookies, cars lined up peacefully, parents guiding traffic. Karen spotted them from across her yard and rushed over, relief and triumph flickering across her face. "Howard, Derek," she called. "Thank goodness you're here. This fiasco is clogging our neighborhood. It's unsightly and violates the no commercial activity rule." Howard, a soft-spoken man, cleared his throat. "Wanda, we've had multiple discussions about this. The girls have city permission to operate on public streets. Our HOA rules don't supersede city ordinances. They aren't on your property or any HOA property." She huffed. "It's right in front of my lawn. The crowds are bigger than ever. This is turning our peaceful street into a marketplace." Derek examined the arrangement, checking the distance from the curb to Karen's property line. He looked uneasy, perhaps new to conflict. "Finally," he said, "legally, they're within city guidelines. It's a short-term event. I don't see an obvious violation of HOA rules, since they're not on private HOA land. The curb is part of the public right-of-way." Karen's eyes bulged. "That's ridiculous. They're obviously blocking traffic." At that moment, a local police cruiser drove by, none other than Lieutenant Martin. He slowed, rolled down the window, and gave the scouts a thumbs up. Seeing the HOA officials, he nodded politely. "Everything looks safe to me, folks. We appreciate them keeping order. Have a good day." Then he drove off, leaving Karen sputtering. Howard spread his palms apologetically. "Wanda, there's nothing we can do. They have official permission. And frankly, we as the HOA don't want the negative publicity of shutting down Girl Scouts. Let's just let them finish their sale." Karen's anger seemed to boil over, but with no immediate recourse, she stomped away. She muttered threats about taking this higher. Howard and Derek, relieved, quietly told the troop parents they were doing fine. "We'll document that we inspected," Derek said, "and that no violation was found. Keep it up." The parents thanked them, grateful for the official reassurance. If Karen had intended to escalate through the HOA, it had just backfired. The troop continued with renewed confidence, though they kept wary eyes on Karen, knowing she might still lash out. By early afternoon, the cookie drive-thru was a resounding success. Cars from within and even outside Sunfield Meadows formed a steady line. Some visitors said they'd seen photos on social media. Friends had posted about how a troop was bravely defying a hostile neighbor. The story spread quickly, inviting more customers who wanted to support the girls. Each purchase came with a cheerful "thank you" from the scouts. They marveled at how quickly their cookie inventory was disappearing. Tracy had to call Rose twice to bring extra boxes from their storage unit. The girls kept track of every transaction, proud to tally each new sale. They were on track to surpass their seasonal goal, something none had expected so soon. Spectators gathered on the sidewalk to watch. A few older residents laughed about how the infamous mop water Karen had unwittingly turned the scouts into local celebrities. Some took photos, posting to neighborhood forums with captions like, "Sunfield Meadows stands behind our Girl Scouts, no matter what." Around 1 p.m., a local newspaper reporter showed up. She took notes, interviewed Tracy, and tried to speak with a few scouts. The children, excited yet shy, explained how they wanted to fund a camping trip and community service projects. The reporter's piece would likely cast Karen in an unflattering light, though her name wouldn't be used without verification. Throughout the day, Karen hovered at the periphery, phone in hand. She paced on her porch, occasionally stepping forward as if to intervene, but then stepping back. Perhaps she realized any direct confrontation with lines of cars, police support, and media coverage would only bury her reputation further. Finally, near 2 p.m., Tracy announced the drive-thru was closing. The scouts cleaned up with the help of parents, removing cones and tables, leaving the curb as they found it, except for a few leftover balloon strings that quickly found their way to the trash. When they counted the day's revenue, they were astonished. Troop 846 had sold more cookies in one day than they'd managed in any entire previous season, all because of the extra publicity fueled by Karen's aggression. The adults congratulated each other, hugging the girls with pride. The entire neighborhood seemed to have rallied in support, turning a negative incident into a triumphant fundraiser. Yet they wondered what Karen's next move might be. When Sunday arrived, the mood in Sunfield Meadows was jubilant for most, but not for Karen. She woke early, scouring the internet for any mention of Girl Scouts and Sunfield Meadows. She found numerous social media posts praising the troop's ingenuity, along with speculation about the neighborhood Karen who had thrown dirty water. None listed her name outright, but the hints were clear. Furious, she realized her once powerful HOA standing had become the stuff of local gossip and scorn. Fueled by spite, Karen decided to escalate her fight. She composed another official-sounding letter, demanding that the HOA board pass a motion banning all street-side sales in Sunfield Meadows, citing residents' privacy and potential safety hazards. She also threatened to file a nuisance complaint with the city, claiming the troopers blocked access to emergency vehicles. The board convened midweek to discuss. Howard Davis, the HOA president, recognized a potential conflict. While the HOA could restrict certain activities on private common spaces, they had no power over public streets. Nonetheless, Karen insisted on a vote. The result was a resounding defeat. Every board member except Karen voted no, pointing out they'd risk legal challenges by overstepping the city's jurisdiction. Enraged, Karen declared she would fight on independently. She attempted to gather signatures from neighbors for a petition against cookie stands. But few residents wanted to cross the Girl Scouts or appear anti-community. At best, Karen collected a meager handful of signatures, mostly from families who disliked increased traffic, but it was nowhere near enough to force a policy change. In a last-ditch attempt, Karen emailed the city council, repeating her complaints about safety. The response was polite but firm. No violation of city rules had occurred, and the local police had deemed the event orderly. Unless you have evidence of actual hazards or repeated infractions, read the council's email, we cannot intervene further. That was the final blow. Karen realized she'd run out of official channels to hamper the Girl Scouts. Her only remaining options were private, petty acts, like the mop water stunt, but those risked legal repercussions. She found herself cornered, watching helplessly as the community's support for Troop 846 surged. Weeks passed, and Troop 846 continued to enjoy unprecedented success. Partly inspired by the Drive-Thru triumph, local businesses invited them to set up cookie booths in front of their stores. A popular coffee shop offered to host the Scouts on weekend mornings, letting them sell to patrons who grabbed lattes. Everyone wanted to show solidarity against the mop water fiasco. A local radio station caught wind of the story. They invited Tracy and a couple of Scouts to discuss their campaign. On air, they skillfully avoided naming Karen, focusing on how adversity had led to a creative solution. We turned a negative situation into a drive-through that worked so well, Tracy said cheerily. We appreciate the outpouring of support. Social media exploded with comments. Listeners from neighboring towns asked for directions to buy cookies. Online orders surged for Troop 846, enabling them to ship boxes across the region. In just a month, the troop had nearly tripled their original sales target. The girls excitedly planned a special summer camping adventure and had funds left over for other philanthropic gestures, like donating cookies to a local homeless shelter. Meanwhile, many neighbors in Sunfield Meadows felt a renewed sense of camaraderie. They recognized that Karen's overreaching hostility had ironically strengthened community bonds. People who barely knew each other found themselves chatting, praising the Scouts, or chuckling over the drive-thru's success. Amid all this positivity, Karen's standing in the neighborhood plummeted. Residents who once tolerated her demands now viewed her with suspicion or outright disdain. She was largely isolated, rarely greeting anyone, still sending the occasional complaint letter about trivial matters, but receiving no traction. Her war on the Girl Scouts had backfired more spectacularly than she could have imagined. Despite the troop's success, some of the Scouts still felt shaken by that day Karen dumped mop water. A few confided in their leaders that they were scared of seeing her. Tracy and Rose held a mini workshop to help the children process the incident and understand that Karen's anger wasn't their fault. One older Scout, Alyssa, proposed a kindness gesture. We should let her know we forgive her, even if she's mean, she said quietly. Another Scout, Beth, nodded. Yeah, maybe then she'll realize she can't scare us away. Rose was touched by their grace. We can't force Ms. Brinkley to change, she gently warned. But if you girls want to do something kind, we can discuss ideas. They brainstormed. Eventually, they decided on leaving a small box of cookies and a handwritten note on Karen's porch, an invitation to bury the hatchet, in Girl Scout fashion. Some parents worried it might provoke Karen, but Tracy believed it could be a sincere attempt at reconciliation. So one afternoon, A small group of scouts tiptoed to Karen's front door while a parent waited on the sidewalk. They placed a neatly wrapped box of Thin Mints, the troop's best seller, alongside a colorful card drawn by the girls, with hearts and daisies scrawled in crayon. Inside, they'd written, "We hope we can be good neighbors. From Girl Scout Troop 846. They pressed the doorbell and scampered back to the sidewalk. Karen's curtain twitched, but she didn't open the door. The girls waved timidly at the window. With that, they left, not certain how Karen would react. Later that evening, Tracy checked the porch discreetly. She saw the cookies and note were gone. No sign of them in the trash or on the doorstep. That was the only clue. Days passed. Karen didn't send a thank you or even an acknowledgement. But, curiously, the next time she passed a group of scouts in the neighborhood, she didn't scowl or throw insults. Instead, she averted her gaze and walked on. It wasn't a warm greeting, but at least it wasn't open hostility. Rumors circulated that Karen had considered moving out of Sunfield Meadows. Some neighbors reported seeing a real estate agent's car in her driveway. Others doubted she'd give up her beloved sense of control. Either way, her outward aggression toward the troop subsided. She retreated to complaining about yard signs or holiday decorations left up past the season. The major standoff was apparently over. In the meantime, the Girl Scouts soared on the wave of positive energy. They wrapped up cookie season with record-breaking numbers, each member earning patches for sales achievements and community engagement. Their sense of pride overshadowed the painful memory of Karen's mop water. The parents marveled at how a negative event had led to so much positive community spirit. As spring turned to summer, Sunfield Meadows held its annual reunion block party, a tradition celebrating the neighborhood's founding anniversary. Streets closed to traffic, vendors set up booths, and families brought potluck dishes to share. Children ran freely with water balloons and chalk, while adults mingled under canopies. It was the biggest social event of the year. Troop 846, flush with leftover funds, decided to sponsor a cookie tasting booth, offering free samples and showcasing how their sales had allowed them to donate to local charities. They decorated the booth with bright banners, photos of their cookie drive-thru, and a collage of their community service projects. On the day of the party, the troop's booth was a centerpiece. People flocked to see the cheerful scouts handing out free cookie samples. Some older residents teased that they were back for more, but in a friendly tone. The girls answered questions about their volunteer work and upcoming camping trip. Their excitement radiated across the block. Midway through the party, as Tracy handed a sample cookie to a neighbor, she spotted Karen standing at a distance, alone, arms crossed. She wasn't scowling quite as fiercely as usual. Perhaps curiosity drew her toward the Girl Scout booth, or she simply had no one else to talk to. Tracy mustered her courage, approached Karen, and offered a polite greeting. "Afternoon, Miss Brinkley. Would you like to try a cookie sample? No charge, it's just for the block party." Karen hesitated. A spark of tension flickered in her eyes, perhaps remembering their past conflicts. But with half the neighborhood watching, she nodded stiffly. Tracy placed a small piece of a Thin Mint on a napkin and handed it over. Karen nibbled the cookie, avoiding eye contact. To everyone's surprise, she murmured, "That's good." A fleeting flush of color touched her cheeks. She looked at the displays showing photos of the drive-thru. The girls in the pictures wore broad smiles. Next to them, a sign read, "Thank you, Sunfield Meadows, for making our drive-thru a success." Perhaps realizing her moment of vulnerability, Karen quickly cleared her throat. "Well, I suppose it all worked out for you," she said in a clipped tone. Then she stepped away before Tracy could reply. Still, it felt like a minor breakthrough, a grudging admission that the cookies were, at least, good. Even that small concession suggested Karen was no longer on the warpath. The parents and scouts observed quietly, relieved that the tension had receded. By the end of cookie season, Troop 846 had raised more money than any other troop in their district, thanks largely to the publicity spurred by Karen's shocking act. They used some funds for a memorable weekend camping trip in the nearby mountains, where the girls learned survival skills, nature conservation, and stargazing. Another portion supported local charities, homeless shelters, a children's hospital, and environmental cleanups. The parents often joked that they owed Karen a bizarre debt of gratitude. Without her attempt to shut them down, they might never have thought to create a cookie drive-thru. They certainly wouldn't have garnered the same media attention or local fervor. Over time, the mop water incident became neighborhood lore, a cautionary tale about how hostility toward kids can backfire spectacularly. New residents heard whispered stories of the day Karen attacked the Girl Scouts and marveled at how the troop turned it around. For the Scouts themselves, the memories cemented valuable lessons about courage, creativity, and standing up for what's right. A few months later, long after cookie season had ended, Tracy was sorting mail when she came across an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single piece of notepaper, typed in short lines. "I've been thinking about what happened. Sorry if I caused so much trouble for the girls. It got out of hand. WB." Though the note wasn't signed, the initials WB, Wanda Brinkley, were unmistakable. There was no official apology or request for forgiveness, merely an acknowledgement that her actions had gone too far. Tracy read the note twice, weighing its significance. It wasn't exactly warm or contrite, but for Karen, it was a profound step. Tracy decided to share it discreetly with Rose and a few other parents. They agreed it was a glimmer of regret. Some suggested writing back, but others felt it better to let sleeping dogs lie. In the end, they chose not to push. They had closure. Over the next year, life in Sunfield Meadows carried on in typical suburban fashion. The Girl Scouts advanced to their next badges, some bridging to older levels, new members joining. Parents and children came and went, but the sense of closeness sparked by the cookie drive-thru lingered. Neighbors chatted more, collaborated on events, and seemed less hesitant to stand up to petty HOA intimidation. Karen remained on the HOA board, focusing on less controversial tasks like scheduling garbage pickups or monitoring pool maintenance. She rarely attended social gatherings. Though her presence still felt like a cold breeze, she no longer waged public battles against the community's kids. Some said she was growing tired. Others believed she still smoldered with bitterness, but knew she'd lost any chance of widespread support. Every so often, Troop 846 would host a small bake sale or car wash for other fundraisers, and not once did Karen intervene. If she peered out her window, it was from a distance. The girls, grown more confident, continued to greet every challenge with the spirit that had seen them through the mop water fiasco. Years later, many of the original Scouts of Troop 846 would reflect on that cookie season as a pivotal experience. They would recall the shock of being drenched in dirty water, the fear and outrage among their parents, and the eventual surge of support that allowed them to triumph. Some described it in college essays about resilience or community involvement. Others told it as an anecdote of the time we turned a bully's actions into a bigger success than ever. For Tracy and Rose, that year became a reminder of why they volunteered. They saw firsthand how children, when nurtured with confidence and unity, could face down intimidation. They cherished the close friendships formed among troop parents, who had banded together to protect the girls. And they never forgot the look of amazement when the final cookie sale tally soared beyond any previous record, thanks in no small part to Karen's involuntary role in the saga. Karen's name would eventually fade from day-to-day conversation. People kept living, forging new memories, and facing new challenges. But her moment of notoriety forever shaped Sunfield Meadows' identity. The legend endured in hushes. Remember the time that Karen tried to shut down the Girl Scouts, and they opened a drive-thru right on her curb? In the quiet hush of a late summer evening, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves along Maple Street in Sunfield Meadows. The same stretch of curb where Troop 846 had once operated their cookie drive-thru now lay empty, a peaceful reminder of how determined young girls could triumph over pettiness. If one looked closely, they might still spot faint chalk lines on the pavement or a stray piece of tape from those old cookie drive-thru signs. They were the faint ghosts of a day that changed the neighborhood, a day when an overzealous HOA figure tried to silence a troop of kids, and, in doing so, turned the entire community into their loyal customers. Such is life in a suburban bubble. The mightiest attempts at control often crumble before genuine goodwill and the innocence of youth. And in Sunfield Meadows, the Girl Scouts would always be known as the ones who took a bucket of dirty water, turned it into unstoppable momentum, and reminded everyone that compassion and a dash of ingenuity always has the final say.